It's boxing us in. The fire just jumped the ridgeline. The voice on the radio was young, laced with a panic that veteran smokejumper Ben Axe Carter hadn't heard in years. He gripped his Pulaski tool, the heat pressing in from all sides, so intense it felt like a physical weight. The air, thick with smoke and ash, tasted of burning pine and defeat. Hold the line, find your deployment zones. Axe bellowed, his voice a gravelly roar honed by 2 decades of fighting nature's fury. His order was protocol. It was the last resort. When you were trapped, you popped your fire shelter, a foil-lined, last-ditch tent, and prayed the inferno passed over you. It was a prayer that often went unanswered. But one member of his 10-person crew wasn't moving towards a clearing. Maya Phoenix Chen stood eerily still, her head tilted, not looking at the approaching wall of flames, but at the sky. She was watching the smoke column, a roiling brown and orange monster that was generating its own lightning. "This is wrong, Axe," she said, her voice unnervingly calm amidst the chaos. "The shelters won't work here. We need to climb." Axe shot her a look of pure disbelief. Climb? Towards the fire? Into the teeth of the granite peaks that had trapped them? He'd been against her assignment from day one. At 35, Maya Chen was a legend in certain circles, but not his. Her official file was a patchwork of short-term contracts with international conservation groups in places like Siberia and the Amazon. It lacked the long, prestigious tenures with the U.S. Forest Service that he and his men respected. To them, she wasn't a seasoned pro. She was a freelancer, a drifter. "We don't have time for your campfire theories, Chen," he snarled. "You follow my orders like everyone else. That's how we survive." "No," she countered, finally turning to face him, her eyes burning with an intensity that rivaled the fire itself. "That's how we die." What Axe and the rest of the crew couldn't know was that Maya's thin file was a testament to her survival, not a lack of experience. The operations she'd run were in places where protocols didn't exist, where fires didn't just burn along predictable fronts, but exploded with the volatile physics of an eruption. Missions that were never documented only survived. Their jump into the Dragon's Maw fire in Idaho had been standard at first. They were tasked with cutting a fire break to protect a remote valley, but within hours, the weather had turned. The wind, driven by a massive pyrocumulonimbus cloud generated by the fire itself, began to behave with terrifying intelligence. It wasn't just a fire anymore. It was a predator, and it had just herded them into a granite canyon with sheer walls on 3 sides. The air suddenly went still and cold, a phenomenon that felt profoundly unnatural as flames raged less than 100 yards away. A powerful downdraft from the smoke column pressed down on them, pinning them like insects. This was the moment the fire jumped the ridge behind them, closing the trap. "Shelters, now." "That's a direct order." Axe screamed, pointing with his axe toward a small, relatively flat area of scree. It was a pathetic patch of ground, but it was all they had. His men, loyal and disciplined, started to move, their faces grim. They knew their odds. "It's a column collapse." Maya's voice cut through their resigned movements. "I've seen this before, in Krasnoyarsk. That downdraft is a precursor. In less than 3 minutes, it's going to reverse into a massive inflow jet. It will suck every ounce of oxygen out of this canyon floor. The shelters will be useless. We'll be cooked alive before the flames even touch us." Axe froze, his hand halfway to his own shelter pack. What she was describing wasn't in any textbook he'd ever studied. It was the stuff of campfire horror stories. "What's your plan then, Phoenix? You want us to grow wings and fly out of here?" The use of her call sign was a pure sneer. She pointed up towards a sheer, 80-foot rock face to their left, a seemingly suicidal path. "We climb, up there. See that overhang about 50 feet up? It's a negative cliff face." A young jumper, barely 20, stared at her. "That's a death trap. We'll be cornered and roasted." "No, Maya insisted, her gaze locked on Axie's. When the inflow jet hits, the wind will behave like water in a river. It will flow up this canyon and slam against that rock face. For about 90 seconds, the force of the updraft will create a vacuum right under that overhang, a wind shadow. There will be a pocket of breathable air there while the firestorm rages below. It's our only chance. The crew looked from her to Axe, their faces a mixture of terror and confusion. Axie's protocol was a known quantity, a slim chance at survival. Maya's plan was a wild, insane gamble based on a story from a place none of them could even find on a map. His entire career, his entire leadership philosophy was built on predictable risk and unshakable discipline. She was asking him to throw it all away on a ghost story. He looked at the approaching flames, then at the sky, and saw the subtle shift in the smoke that Maya had seen. He saw the certainty in her eyes, the absolute lack of doubt. It wasn't the look of a rookie guessing. It was the look of a veteran who had stood at the edge of the abyss before and walked away. The lives of 9 men rested on his decision. To hell with it, Axe growled, his voice cracking. He turned to his crew. You heard her. Drop the shelters, climb, go. Go now. For a split second, the men hesitated, shocked by the reversal. But Axie's authority, now thrown behind this mad plan, was absolute. The scramble was a desperate, panicked clawing match against the rock. They were not climbers, and the rock face was treacherous. Axe, staying at the back, pushed his younger jumpers up, while Maya, surprisingly agile, led the way, finding handholds none of them could see. They reached the overhang just as an unholy roar filled the canyon. The downdraft ceased, and for one terrifying second, there was absolute silence and stillness. Then the world erupted. A jet of superheated air, moving at over 100 miles per hour, surged up the canyon. They pressed themselves flat under the overhang as a river of fire. Embers and burning debris shot past them, so close they could feel the pressure wave. Below them, the spot where they would have deployed their shelters became a white-hot furnace. Maya had been right. They would have been incinerated in seconds. For what felt like an eternity but was only a minute, they clung to the rock in their tiny pocket of still, breathable air, while Armageddon raged just feet away. Then, as quickly as it came, the main fire front passed, and the wind returned to a steady, manageable roar. They were alive. Battered, terrified, but alive. The trek back to the extraction point the next morning was silent. No one looked at Maya, but the space around her was one of deep, awestruck respect. Back at the chaotic main camp, Axe walked directly over to her, his face streaked with soot and grime, his body slumped with exhaustion. His crew watched. Everything I knew told me you were wrong, he said, his voice raw. And everything I knew would have gotten us all killed. You didn't just save us, Chen. You rewrote the book. She just nodded, too tired to speak. The next evening, at the main operational briefing, the fire commander was outlining the strategy for the next 48 hours. When he finished, Axe stood up, something a crew boss rarely did in a room full of top brass. With all due respect, sir, Axe said, his voice carrying across the entire tent. Our models for this fire are wrong. We have someone here who understands what this thing is capable of. He looked directly at Maya. Sergeant Chen saved my entire crew yesterday. I believe she should be here, helping you plan the containment strategy. A murmur went through the room. The fire chief looked from Axe, the grizzled veteran, to the quiet woman he was pointing at. He saw the unified, adamant look on the faces of the rest of Axie's crew. Sergeant Chen, the chief said, "Please join us at the table." As Maya walked forward, she passed her crewmates. One of them, the young jumper who had called her plan a death trap, met her eyes. Phoenix, he said, the name no longer an insult, but a title. It fits. She had walked into the fire and brought them all back with her. Her file was still thin, her past still a mystery, But her legacy was now written in survival of 10 men who had seen the dragon's maw up close and lived to tell the tale. All thanks to the woman who knew how to find the shadow in the wind.